Hi everybody and welcome back to another Pushing Polygons. Today we're talking about the PS5 Pro. Now, consoles have been around for a very, very long time as the discussion has happened over the last few weeks. From the NES all the way through the PlayStation 5, we have had a console on average every 5 to 7 years, and that doesn't look like it's going to be stopping anytime soon, as Sony is preparing to launch the PlayStation 5 Pro. Now, a lot of people think that it is too soon for a Pro console. I assure you it is not, and we're going to talk about who this console is for, what can you expect for the price, and what are some of the leaked specifications, and really what I think or what I'm going to speculate is the future of the PS5 Pro in the current landscape. And we're getting into all that here next. So if you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more like this, hit the subscribe button. And of course, let me know in the comments below what you think. Would you get a PS5 Pro, or are you content in waiting for the PlayStation 6? Or hey, are you thinking about hopping to PC with all the dilemma that the game industry is going under? Let me know below. But for now, let's continue on talking about the technical specifications of the PS5 Pro. So, based on the rumors and speculation that is going on out there, we are looking at a die-shrunk Zen 2 architecture. Now, what does this mean really in layman's terms? Is that Sony isn't really going to have to put a lot of work in ensuring that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games work on the PS5 Pro. They're going to be able to put a faster clocked, potentially cooler chip, SoC, into the device and not have developers really need to work that diligently on providing patches to get frame rates up. Now, is the PlayStation 5 Pro going to be an 8K device? I don't think so. That really isn't where the market has gone with televisions, and because of inflation and other world events, that really isn't something that consumers are looking for at this time. Really, with the advent of engines such as the new Unreal Engine and the added number of triangles and textures and different graphical options which are supposed to be there to upgrade fidelity, really what the PlayStation 5 is meant for is to keep a consistent, and I would say what would be an expected level of performance for a mid-generation console. When we originally started this generation, we did a lot of talking about how games were performing at a great lock 60, and there were even some that were 120 hertz, and everybody got really into the lock 60 and 120 hertz mentality. And because of this, when games that came out that were really meant for this generation and weren't cross-gen games started appearing, and they weren't lock 60, people were shocked. And I don't think they should have been shocked, because in a lot of cases, this is how hardware and software behave in a environment in which the software is lagging behind the hardware, and then when it catches up or exceeds, your hardware, when you release it, is a set fixed point in time, where software is dynamic. Now, when you were working on a title, you may start it on Unreal Engine 4 and then decide that the benefits of Unreal Engine 5 are enough to upgrade the title to that engine. Now, that typically doesn't happen. It's really a case-by-case scenario for games, but it is something that isn't unheard of. And when we're looking at these games, you know, you're also talking about that the hardware that it's running on was released in 2020. This is now 2024, so we're talking 4 years later. The hardware was developed a few years prior to that. So, you know, Zen 2 is definitely not the shiniest piece of silicon that AMD or TSMC are currently producing. And because of that, you know, there are definitely concerns. So how do you fix that? Well, what Sony is rumored to be doing is they are going to die shrink Zen 2, which keeps compatibility. And because of the density of the transistors, it's going to allow them to potentially produce more chips on the same silicon of wafer. And because Sony is having margin problems right now, we know that this is something that they would look to do. The one thing that is most likely to happen is if they can get Zen 2 clocked up, is that they would put in a new GPU into the system, because the GPU, being that it would be generally on the same architecture, it's still monolithic, so it's not like you're having to reprogram to different registers, it's going to be basically more compatible. You're going to be able to push those frames, and with a higher clocked Zen 2, you're going to be able to basically get the frames out the door. So with the games that are GPU limited, because games are designed around the GPU and not so much the CPU, we see this even on PC, that really it's only at lower resolutions does a game become CPU bound. I mean, unless you're talking about something like Civilization 6, then your GPU is your limiting factor. So if you put in a more powerful GPU and you're able to increase the clock speeds on your CPU by up to a gigahertz, then you're actually looking at some pretty good games. We'll get games on the mind here, talking about PlayStation, but you're looking at some pretty good gains in that regard. And this is going to be what gets you to your lock 60, or if it's at a lower graphical fidelity, your 120 hertz. So I think this is what the PS5 Pro is definitely intended for. Now, as far as RAM, if you're not pushing higher resolutions, at least not through a conventional native form, which I don't, as I said, I don't think Sony is going with an 8K mentality. You don't need more than 16 gigs of RAM on the system board. Now, that RAM could be faster because the initial RAM in the PS5, I believe, was 16 gigabits per second or 14 gigabits per second. I don't believe they make that anymore, so Sony might even be able to get a better deal on the current RAM. Now, they might software limit the speed of the RAM, but the chips that they are should be procuring for the PS5 Pro would be at 18 gigabits per second. Again, this is really about the transference of data in that respect, streaming graphics and instructions through the system. Are we going to see new I/O? I doubt it. I think the I/O will stay the same. The chassis, that might be made prettier just because, it's a new product and it's Let's face it, the PS5 Pro isn't exactly the prettiest thing on the market, although I will definitely say it is more unique than the boxes that Microsoft makes for the Xbox. Now, I think one tech spec which really deserves, of course, some scrutiny is going to be how much storage are they actually going to include in the PS5 Pro. And I think you have to do at least a terabyte, but if you're going to call it a Pro model, it should be 2 because of the upgrade process that Sony has chosen to do with M.2 storage. They have definitely shied away from offering higher storage models of PlayStation 5. That may continue with the PS5 Pro as storage prices in some cases have started to rise and are expected to continue doing so through 2024. Storage is, I think, is the one piece of it that is really questionable. Again, of course, you can move, you can put in an M.2, and I don't think that's going to change. I definitely think that Sony is going to encourage that. Now, tech specs and everything are great, but what does that mean in the context of games? And so we're going to talk about, games like GTA 6, Dragon Age Dreadwolf, Judas, Wolverine, and just really what is the point here? And the point is to get you that 40 to 60 frame per second experience on the latest games. Anything that is being made in Unreal Engine 5 or upgraded versions of Frostbite are going to challenge older hardware in ways that we haven't seen before. As much as everybody ogled the Unreal Engine 5 demo of Lumen and Nanite, these technologies that are meant to bring photorealism are going to be some of the causes of older hardware not being able to perform. Yes, they do include some things like dynamic detail. As you are farther away from the item, it is less detailed, and it gets more detailed as you move forward, and it can process that information a lot faster, as there are some games that have really hyper movement. But these aren't things that games in some respect couldn't do already. What Nanite is allowing it to do is do it faster. It's also allowing a lot more triangles for a lot more detailed terrain, a lot more detailed character model. And the second you start putting in more triangles that a GPU has to process, that is going to take more processing power and more processing time. So how do you get around it is upscaling. Now, whether that's through native algorithms, such as we saw in the PlayStation 4 with the checkerboarding, or it's going to be some form of AI nano processing unit or NPU, is really up to question. Rumors right now are suggesting there might be an NPU in the PS6, or excuse me, the PlayStation 5 Pro, or there might be some form of machine learning. I am going to lean into the machine learning instead of saying that it is going to be a native AI unit, because that costs more money, and unless it's proven, I don't see a reason for them to spend on the silicon, especially on a device which historically has shown, although it's done well in sales in the PS4 Pro versus the base model, that it isn't going to be the driving force of the product generation. Now, would they include it in something like the PlayStation 6? Yes, absolutely. But even with the machine learning, with a Sony version of DLSS, with the up of the clocks and a new GPU, what are you looking at? Well, you're looking at smoother gameplay in GTA 6. Now, is it going to be 60? That's, a very good question, considering the fact that games like GTA with their city simulation are very intensive. Could they do a 40 FPS? It's possible. Is it something that I would hold to? It really is going to be dependent upon Rockstar and how far they push GTA 6. Now, GTA 6 is not due out until 2025, just like Dragon Age Dreadwolf. Now, we've seen some teaser video of Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and if that is in more of a city type setting, again, we are going to get more. It's going to be a simulation again, and it is going to have sections of the game which might get bogged down. So you're going to need that faster clock to really push through all this additional data that the system is getting. Now, some of these games, I wouldn't actually be surprised if on the base PS5 unit, we saw them struggle at 30 frames. Or if they don't struggle at 30 frames, there's going to be a compromise in the resolution of the console. But one of the points that I want to make with this is that because of the way they are doing the clocks, that we might not even need to get these games patched. They might just run faster due to the hardware. And if they run faster due to the hardware, and it doesn't require refinement by the developers, I think we all win there, because we can go back and we can get better experiences off these old games. Now, the only reason why I'm even suggesting that this could be a possibility is the fact that if you look at the PS5, they talk about how there is a dynamic clock between the CPU and the GPU, and how that has to do with power and heat, and it's basically being actively balanced, and they put profiles in for that. So as the PS5 Pro comes out and they see these things, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make system updates to add some sort of profiles that are watching these new games and adjust that for both of the base PS5 and the PS5 Pro. Let's talk about price and availability here for a minute. So price, again, we talked about Sony having issues with margins. Last quarter, they were below 6% in the margin. They would really have to recoup some of that money for the die shrink from 6 nanometer to 4 nanometer, or the cost they paid to contract to AMD and TSMC. And just the general economy. Now, inflation, of course, has hit us all. It's not just limited to people. It's goes and it's effective against companies as well. And unfortunately, just like us all, you have a certain amount of money that you want to make sure that you have before you're willing to put that cash into savings. Well, Sony is the same way, and they're going to want to have a certain margin that they make. So I'm putting out basically right now that I believe they're looking at a $599 box. One possibility that could exist to potentially lower costs further, and we haven't seen this since the PlayStation 3, is that last year, Sony released a PlayStation Slim, PS5 Slim, and The one possibility with the die shrink that I want to bring up, again, it's going to make this denser. If you're using the same architecture and you're not clocking it faster, there is potential there to really have some savings. So there is the possibility that we could actually see a PlayStation 5 a Super Slim. And I think that really is all dependent upon how much Sony could get cooling under control and whether or not they could find someone to integrate the disk drive into the console. So basically think like a really, really cheap PS5. So we're talking like sliding door on top sort of deal. And that is one possibility. That could also potentially help Sony get cost of the console down even further, where we might see a price drop. So right now, the PS5 is tracking a little bit ahead of the PS4. However, I think if they don't get below that $399.99 barrier on a more consistent basis than just holidays, that is going to prove to be a problem, and it is a problem because the cost on everything is just going up. Availability and time frame, this is going to be a holiday launch for the PS5 Pro. I don't think there's any surprises there. Announcement time, we're probably looking September. I mean, they could do it in June if they choose to do a showcase and talk about it there, but they could do something separate. If we don't see Wolverine, then at the PS5 showcase or the PlayStation showcase in June, this is where I would expect Wolverine to show up. There are going to need to be games announced alongside the Pro. They have to build excitement for this new console, and that is how you do it. You have to have games with it. I want to know from you guys, is this something that you would buy? If it could get you 40 frames in GTA 6 or 60 frames in Judas, where the base PS5 couldn't, would this be your console of choice? Would you make the upgrade? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, of course, hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit that subscribe button. But with that being said, guys, I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now.